and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom, and we recently hit 30,000 subscribers, so a big thank you to everyone who subscribes, watches, comments, all that good stuff. It's a big achievement for the channel, and I'm very thankful to everyone. And to kind of do something for that, I did a little poll a few weeks ago, basically asking what it is you would like me to do for a kind of celebratory video, really. And it came out as a tie, really, one being a kind of more personal or behind the scenes video, which I'm working on. I'm about halfway through that one. I've done the personal stuff. I just need to do a kind of behind the scenes kind of section to it. The other was a Q&A, and that's what I'm going to do today. So we'll kind of crack on with that. I did ask anyone to ask any questions, and I've basically got them all here. And I've also added some sort of questions that I often get asked in just kind of on videos and stuff like that, just so I can kind of have it all in one video. So we'll kind of crack on and rattle through it because I don't want it to be too long. So the first question, and these are in no order really, as I've written them down. Were your parents into film as much as you are? I only ask because movies were one of the things that my whole family has in common. So the answer is no, and maybe to a degree yes. So when I was young and my parents were together, my parents divorced when I was relatively young, I wasn't allowed to watch any TV, like zero TV. I was not allowed to watch anything. We did go to the cinema a few times. I saw the original Star Wars, which is actually my earliest memory, at the cinema with my father. But I was very young. But I do remember it, vaguely. But I didn't watch any like films on TV or any TV programmes because I wasn't allowed to watch any TV. When my parents got divorced, my mum, who was, I wouldn't exactly say she was a film fan, but she had a kind of casual interest, and I was allowed to watch stuff. So I eventually had kind of sort of started getting into stuff, and eventually she actually bought a Betamax and which is a video player, VCR player. And where we lived, there was a kind of the local video shop, and I remember this is the start of how I got into B movies, basically. And she rented out Galaxina, which is a kind of lesser known science fiction spoof. And I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a 1980 film. And anyway, and I liked it. And it was kind of like a bit of a parody of Star Wars and Star Trek and stuff. And no one had ever heard of it. When I sort of spoke about it, no one knew what I was talking about. So to me, it had opened this kind of world of lesser known films, which was probably the start of where I kind of really got into films. But I wouldn't really say I properly got into films until I was probably about 18. You know, I kind of started renting videos with my then girlfriend and stuff. And that's kind of where I would say I sort of started to really develop my my film kind of love. I was more into kind of music and stuff a little earlier, but that is where. Okay, what do I think of AI in general, and then AI in low budget movies and YouTube videos? So I did a review a little while ago called The Bone Keeper, which is a low budget film which uses AI, and I don't mind AI in film, particularly low budget film, because I'm old enough to remember when like CGI was first introduced, and there was a lot of kind of pushback on it, especially in the kind of the low budget you know, kind of films and stuff, and there still is to a degree, but you know, we're at that point where there's a new technology and it's very kind of like similar and stuff in some respects. And back then everyone was like, oh no, it's all practical and everything, it's the artistry and all the rest of it. And it's there. Now, as I said in my review of The Bone Keeper, low budget filmmakers now have a tool where they could do more complex VFX shots than they would be able to afford otherwise. So in actual fact, I think it opens up a world of possibilities to potential low budget cinema that we might not have had. So a movie like The Bone Keeper, had it been had, you know, practical or traditional CGI VFX, it would have looked terrible, or they simply wouldn't have been able to do it for the budget that they had for the film. So certainly in regards to low budget movies, I don't have a problem with it. I do think, and I have reviewed a few movies of where it's clearly like, you know, shoehorned in, and it's not particularly kind of blended with the other shots very well. And I think there's probably I wouldn't say danger, but it's probably going to be a short-term effect where the kind of the VFX, the AI is still in its infancy, and filmmakers are just excited to use it, and they're kind of bunging it in films, and it doesn't sort of suit the kind of the rest of the film. So I suspect we'll have a kind of a period of that where it's really apparent and look a bit kind of like you know, out of place at times. But I think as the technology improves, and I don't suspect it will take very long. I was suggesting about, you know, probably 2 years or even less, that it will be more or less seamless. Now, as in regards to the bigger budget movies, you know, I can understand. I mean, all the unions, this is what they were talking about, and the writers' strikes and all the rest of it. I understand that more because these budgets are a lot bigger and they have a lot more kind of in regards to staff, and you don't have that sort of we can't afford to do it mentality. So I do think there are some lines, like for example script writing. I certainly think that could be a problem with AI, or replacing actors. I actually don't mind when they kind of do like a version of a dead actor or something like that. But you know, I think that they at least should be some restrictions in it. But I think as far as YouTube videos, I'm really enjoying some of the kind of the AI YouTube videos, I have to say. So I have no problem with that. Look, and this is a controversial topic. I know that there are, certainly on the Bone Keeper video, there's a lot of people getting the AI slop, all the rest of it. That's fine if that's your opinion. You know, I don't want to say you can't have that, but it's entirely up to you. But that's just how I feel about it. Okay. Want to know more about your morning and evening skincare routines? Yeah, so I do actually use some creams and stuff. So I'm 51, nearly 52 at the time of recording this video. And you know, I'm noticing a few like bags and stuff and all the rest of it. So I wouldn't say I use it every night, but I do put some on normally just before I go to bed. But I'm not like religious about what I buy. I just buy whatever's kind of on offer and stuff like that. It's not like I spend loads of money on expensive creams. I just buy, that'll do, you know, and just basic moisturiser and stuff like that. I probably will do it evening or morning. I probably wouldn't do it both, to be honest with you. But there is a small degree of skincare. And this person also asks, how much do I bench at the gym? And the honest answer is I actually don't know, to be honest. Once upon a time I used to go to the gym quite regularly, and even then I don't actually know, because I've never taken, even though when I was going to the gym sort of fairly regularly, I never really took it especially seriously, and I didn't kind of like, the company I work with and in my day job, everyone there is like super into the gym. It's all they bleat on about, and it's just like, oh god, it's so boring listening to them. So I used to go to the gym, and I just used to lift as much as I could, to the point where, okay, I can't do anymore. But I never really paid that much attention to like the limit, if that makes sense. I just did it until I couldn't do it anymore. And you know, that's probably the incorrect way of doing it. I can accept that. But that's basically what I did. So it's probably different depending on different days, if I'm completely honest with you. These days, I tend to work a lot more than I did. So I don't tend to do that as much of that kind of stuff anymore. But even when I went regularly, I couldn't tell you how much I actually would regularly bench, to be honest. Next question. Will I address the idea of making a collaborative YouTube movie that will be made by you and your subscribers? If 20 people contributed 4 or 5 minutes, if you had a feature, everyone involved could post their comments and such. Simple idea is everyone films a zombie scene where people are fighting them, humans get killed. You could go up as director and arrange the clips. So I actually don't like remote roles in films. So let me address that first of all. So when you have films that are made through crowdfunding, things like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and one of the perks, you pay so much money and you have a role on screen, like on a Zoom call or something like that. I don't think these kind of roles, I mean, these people are not actors, and the performance is often kind of like grind to a halt, and then they have to find time to have all of these kind of like little remote roles in. And I guess there might be a reason why you might have 1 or 2 in a movie, but I just feel it grinds a movie to a halt most of the time. And when you're watching it as a viewer, I understand that it's fun for the people involved, but I actually think it's detrimental to the actual kind of movie, you know. And I kind of almost, you know, not that I would ever kind of like say people shouldn't do it if they want to. I kind of don't like the idea of crowdfunding to a certain degree, because if you want to make a movie, then you get it financed. It's my personal opinion on it. Like I said, I'm not. This is not a hill I'm willing to die on necessarily. And if people want to do it, it's entirely up to them. If you want to spend your money and contribute to a crowdfunding campaign, go ahead and do it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. But for me personally, you know, if someone wants to make a movie and they want to get financing, to me, I find it a little cheeky to ask the people who are then going to watch it to kind of pay for it. Especially like, I'm going to pay to be in a role. Surely, like, you should be paying people to be in a role, not the other way around. So I have a little bit of an issue with kind of crowdfunding in general. I have never done it. I probably never would do it, personally speaking. In regards to myself making a movie, and I think I've got another question which asks something similar later on. I have thought about it. I will give you a brief story. So as you probably will know, I review low budget movies. And I actually kind of got in a little bit of a spat with a filmmaker some years ago when I did a somewhat negative review of their movie. And they basically said to me, well, you couldn't do any better. And I was like, well, I'm not a filmmaker. But then I thought, do you know what? I bet I could. I bet I could. And I started thinking about what I could do. And I thought, what could I use? Because it would be a very, very, you know, zero budget movie. And I kind of came up with an idea. I know there's another question on here somewhere that kind of adjusts us, so I might go into a little bit more detail in a bit. Okay. What is your favourite zombie movie? I would say Return of the Living Dead. It's the one I've probably watched the most. There are other movies like Evil Dead. I don't count that as a zombie movie especially. But so a pure zombie movie, I would say Return of the Living Dead. I'm also quite fond of the third movie in that film franchise. But probably the first one, the original one, to me, is overall my favourite zombie movie. Here we are. Would I make my own fantasy or sword and sorcery movie films or shorts on YouTube? Not shorts, not fantasy or sword and sorcery, because that would require too much budget, too much kind of investment, and I wouldn't do that. As I've kind of mentioned already, I'm somewhat against crowdfunding, because I wouldn't expect other people to pay for what I want to do. So it wouldn't be a fantasy movie. I have had an idea for a kind of horror movie. I don't want to say too much about it because this isn't something that's definitely going to happen. But there's a possibility at some point down the line I might do that. But we'll see. It would require some investment, but it's something I would want to pay for myself. Because if it went wrong and it never came out, I wouldn't want people to kind of like have put money in expecting stuff. So I would want the onus to be on me and me alone. You know, that's basically where I am with it. There's a possibility, there's a couple of things that would have to line up. And basically, that's all I want to say, because there's a reason why, if it ever happens, there is a reason why I don't want to say too much about it. But, you know, maybe one day. What movie do I like that people would not expect? Maybe you're a fan of The Lion King or something. I don't really like animation, so there you go. So it won't be an animated movie. And to answer your question directly, not really. I think I've pretty much covered all the films that I like. I'm not embarrassed to kind of say I like a particular movie. I mean, we tend to focus on the channel with horror, science fiction and fantasy and action to a degree. So I would say a movie like Weird Science is a movie that's a comedy, an out-and-out comedy. There's a few fantastical elements to it, but it's a movie that it's in my top 10 of all time. So certainly that, and that was, you know, is one of my all-time favourite films. And another movie I would mention, which is kind of sci-fi, which is something that we do cover here more often than not, but is the movie Frequency. And I say that one because it's not so much the science fiction element to that, it is the kind of the emotional element to that movie that I actually kind of quite like. And I don't tend to be a particularly emotive person, if I'm completely honest with you. So, but that's a rare occasion where I find myself kind of being somewhat emotionally affected by that particular film. What are my favourite other media? For example, books, video games, to name a couple of examples. So books, I actually tend to read a lot more reference books than novels, but I'm presuming you mean novels. So when I was younger, I used to follow two authors in particular, Guy N. Smith, who basically wrote B-movies. If you can imagine like a B-movie author, Guy N. Smith. And he did a series about giant crabs, and there was one called The Slime Beast that I like. And I think it was like, he did like The Fog, not the John Carpenter's The Fog, but he did another movie called The Fog. Book, sorry. And the other one I really liked was James Herbert, who is often cited as the British Stephen King. And he did I read a great number of his books, and he's probably most famous for a series of novels involving like rats and things, and that's probably his biggest sort of series. Which I've read them all and enjoyed them. So they're certainly the books that I've read. I've read a few others here and there and stuff, and I've read a few Michael Crichton books, and I call it The Swarm from Michael Crichton, which hasn't been made into a movie. But I read a lot more reference books and stuff like that, more so than novels, if I'm honest. I used to read comics, but not anymore. As for video games, I don't really play video games anymore. I actually used to work in the video game industry for a long time, and even then I didn't play them that much. But I would say, early days, one of my favourite video games was Shadowrun on the Super Nintendo, which is like a sort of cyberpunk role-playing game. And then for the Xbox 360, which was the last sort of, actually, it's a lie, I do own an Xbox One now, because I really I wanted to replay Skyrim, so I bought an Xbox One just so I could replay Skyrim, which was one of my sort of favourite games. That and Oblivion, and then also specifically Gears of War 2. I really like Gears of War 2 out of that franchise. That's my favourite one. So those games are my favourites, but I don't really play them at all these days. I replayed Skyrim recently, and I sort of finished it, and I haven't really played it since. A few examples of big budget movies that I have enjoyed. So, when I was younger, obviously it was mostly big budget movies. Jaws, Ghostbusters and the like. Excuse me. More recently, you know, I've enjoyed a lot of the Marvel films, particularly like Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I've kind of got off the boil a little bit with Marvel, as most people have. This year I really enjoyed Project Hail Mary. I don't tend to review a lot of these because there's so many other channels that do reviews. Even sort of like mid-tier movies. Films that appear on like Shudder and Netflix. I review some of them, or even the kind of movies like Hokum and stuff. I review a couple, but I don't go out on my way to review all of them, or even most of them, because there's so many other channels that sort of do that. That's why I like to kind of do the lesser known films to a degree. But yeah, Project Hail Mary was the film that I really enjoyed recently. Any quality recommendations for people getting into low budget movies? Like a few that are high quality. It's funny you should ask. I've actually made, I think, 2 or 3 like top 10 lists, and I'll see if I can remember to link them below, where I actually do recommend like hidden gem type films. So I would suggest that they're on my like top 10 playlists. If I remember, I'll put them in the link in the description. There are a number of like low budget or lower budget movies that I think are absolutely bangers. And this is the fun about getting into low budget movies, because you will find the odd banger here and there. Yes, there's a lot of crap, but you will find the odd like awesome movie here and there. So please do check out my my recommendation lists. So just, you know, to name just a couple off the top of my head, the 2 that I always talk about. Turbo Kid, which is a kind of like 80s post-apocalyptic style movie. It's not 80s, it's actually a modern film. It's 2015, but it's kind of like it would have been made in the 80s. And then Borderlands, also known as Final Prayer, which is a kind of a found footage movie that I think is genuinely one of the most creepy films I've ever seen. I mean, they're not mega low budget, but you know, they're certainly not mainstream. Have I noticed any changes in your channel performance recently in terms of view count and subscribers? And has it affected the way I approach my videos? Yes, I have noticed. No, it hasn't changed my approach, to be honest with you. So I've been doing YouTube since 2013, so it's been a minute. And it ebbs and flows, to be honest. So, you know, as much as you might have a slump, there are times where you find you'll get like a bump, or a kind of like a big surge in viewership and things like that. I mean, the algorithm changes, so there are a few things that you can do to kind of, I guess, help. I think, and I know the person, I won't say the name, but I think one of the things is, and then this is something I don't really subscribe to, because someone said this to me once, you should make your videos 5 minutes or less. Because one of the things that, for example, affects, if YouTube recommends it, is the amount of time, like the average duration of time. And if you do a long video, like this one's going to be, probably the like percentage of actual runtime is going to be relatively low. So if you make your video shorter, so 5 minutes or less, generally speaking, the portion of the time, because I think the average time that people watch a video is about a minute, generally speaking, or about kind of like 70 seconds, 80 seconds, something like that. That's the overall general kind of average viewership for a video. So if you are making a 10-minute video and someone's only watching a minute of it, that's only 10%. But if you are making a 5-minute video and someone is only watching a minute, that's 20% of your video, and therefore that video is more likely to get recommended. So one of the advice that I was given was to make your videos shorter. Now, I don't do that because I can't say everything I want to say in 5 minutes. So I'm kind of going against that because I want to make videos how I want to make them. And I don't, you know, if they don't do very well, they don't do very well. I don't really stress about it, to be honest. It's not like, it will happen or it won't happen. But there are other things as well. For example, to go into, just to make another point about that, if you watch your own videos, like, because I sometimes will watch them back to make sure I haven't made any mistakes. Watch the whole thing, don't just watch part of it, because that, if you, like, just like I've just said, if you only watch part of it, it basically kind of tracks the kind of the, you know, the sort of, what progress you've made, and it will set that and it won't recommend it. So that's the kind of one thing. There are various other things as well. Look at when your highest viewership is and things like that. But the algorithm changes so much. And the other thing I've noticed as well, and doing horror films, this happens quite a lot. If a video is tagged either limited or no ads, or sometimes it's restricted, that will screw up your kind of your viewership for weeks. So, for example, I did a collection update a little while ago, and there was a bunch of kind of like more extreme horror films, and yeah, it picked that up and it basically put it as restricted. It was limited ads, and then since then, you know, the videos haven't been doing very well because that's what happens. It just doesn't kind of like recommend your videos. Again, I personally don't worry about it. I'm not saying other people shouldn't worry about it, but like there's that, and you know, things like the thumbnails and all the rest of it. So there's stuff you can do. I have noticed slumps. It doesn't really, you know, I don't tend to kind of like worry about it, if I'm honest. I mean, at one point I was demonetized for 6 months. I did a review of a movie called SX Tape, and it's a horror film, before you say anything, and I got demonetized for 6 months, but I still did videos every day like I do now, because no one knew. I didn't complain about it, didn't do anything. I just kind of got on with it, and like no one would know unless you've just watched this very video, and you know, eventually it kind of bounced back. But again, I'm not saying this is how other people should be. I'm only telling you how I approach it. Right. Okay. Most anticipated movies, big budget and low budget movies for 2026. Big budget movies. I'm really looking forward to the Master of the Universe movie. I'm a huge fan of that when I was a kid. You know, I don't have massively high expectations for it, I have to say. But I am looking forward to it. I will definitely go into that on day one. I'm really looking forward to the new Spider-Man movie. As I kind of mentioned earlier, I used to read comics, and Spider-Man was always my favourite character. So I'm always quite, even though I'm a bit fatigued with Marvel, Spider-Man I do enjoy, and I'll look forward to that. And the Street Fighter movie. Because as mentioned, I worked in the video game industry, and Street Fighter 2, when that came out on home consoles, was around the time that I was working in the industry, a long time ago. And so it's kind of somewhat nostalgic in that respect. But for low budget movies, it's a little bit of a different story, and I should explain why. Because I do not seek out information about low budget films. As I've said in a couple of reviews, I like to go into films, and there's a difference between low budget, because I do watch trailers for high budget movies, mainstream movies. Lower budget movies, B movies, straight to video, Netflix, all the rest of it, or you know, I like to go in as fresh and as uninformed as I possibly can, so I can understand if the film, when I'm watching a film, is the movie communicating to me about what it's supposed to be saying? Am I understanding what it's saying? I find sometimes if I read about the film, like the synopsis, or I watch a trailer. It sort of guides me into understanding what the film's about. And I like to try and, when I'm watching a movie, and this is how I approach the reviews really, is the film taking me on that journey with them? Because sometimes, and I have done it where, you know, had I not read a synopsis, I wouldn't have a clue about what this film's trying to do. But I've previously read the synopsis, so I know where the film's going. And in my opinion, the film should not have to rely on homework. So I deliberately try not to even look about what films are coming out. So how do I find films? Quite often I get sent screeners, to be honest with you. So this is the first time I see them. And if I see it's like a horror movie, I don't even read the blurb they send me. I'll just go, fine, I'll review that. And that's sometimes they're torturous, to be honest with you. But you know, that's the way it goes. But so that's the kind of how I kind of view that. And that's just, again, it's just for me. I'm not saying other people should follow that same example, but for me to really judge a film, I feel like I don't want to know anything about it, or very little about it. But I will say, the only kind of, and it's not even a low budget movie, the only film that I would say which is maybe less mainstream that I'm really looking forward to is the 47 Meters Down, The Wreck, because I have no idea when it's coming out. All I know that it's coming out at some point, because I really like shark movies, and specifically the first 47 Meters Down I think is legitimately the best shark movie outside of Jaws. So I am looking forward to that, but I haven't read anything about it. I don't know the synopsis. I don't even know if there's a trailer out for it. I have no idea. I just know that it's coming out, but I am looking forward to that. I don't even know if it's 2026 though, to be fair. Why have I started doing energy drinks reviews on the channel? Well, I drink this stuff anyway, and I hadn't really done much in the way of shorts, to be honest. So a short, because you can only do up to 3 minutes, it's too short for me to do a review in that way. So I thought, well, you know, I drink in these energy drinks anyway. And I like to try different ones. If I see a new one, I want to pick it up. So I thought I would start doing it. And that's basically it. It's as simple as that. You may have noticed I have stopped doing it where I work. I'm now doing it just at home, so it has the same background as here, basically. So to keep it consistent, I've just kind of like taken all the old ones off and just started filming new ones on this background. Okay, I've lost where I am. Can I drop the guy who features on your channel who wears dark sunglasses? He's not in keeping with the rest of your channel. I appreciate the comment, but professional amateur hour, you know, he's referring to. I won't drop him, but I will. What I would say is maybe I'll talk a little bit about the collaborators that I've worked with, because when I created this channel, I never really wanted it to just be just me. The whole idea of this, when I originally created it, was for it to be a collaborative thing between people. There was originally going to be me and two friends, but one friend decided that they didn't want to be on camera because they were a bit didn't want to get any criticism, and the other one ended up kind of getting his wife pregnant, more or less, after I had started. He did appear in a few videos. So then it ended up. So then I had kind of started it, and it was just me. So I've invited other people, both physically, who I know, to kind of like do videos with me, but also other channels who, and we've had quite a few over the time, and they are part of this channel. So how do I approach that? So if I ever have a conversation with someone who is a creator, and I say, you know, do they want to make videos for my channel? The idea being that because my channel is a certain size, I like to offer some smaller creators an opportunity to do videos on my channel, so they can basically pimp their own channel out. So therefore they're kind of doing some work for the Geek Legion of Doom, but at the same time they are basically giving themselves exposure, with the idea being that they can kind of obviously help promote their own channel. So I'll use Aaran at Screenstars, who is now a fairly sizable channel. You know, and he, in the early days, he did a lot of reviews for Geek Legion of Doom. You may have noticed he hasn't done them recently because he doesn't need to now, because you know, his channel has got to the size where it's fairly substantial on its own, and that's great, and I'm super happy for him, and I'm thankful for the time that he has given to me in the channel, and you know, it's in some ways helped his channel as well. But some people just want to do it. They don't want to have their own channel, and you know, there's been a variety of people over the years who have kind of come in and out and stuff like that. And when people do it, I basically sort of say, you know, I've got a pre-written thing. I say, here's a few things that I basically, you know, don't be kind of like personal with you kind of criticising people. I try to ask people to kind of rate it 1 to 10, so it's the same as my kind of rating, so it's sort of consistent. A few other things like that. But outside of that, I say, look, it's your, you know, you do it how you want to do it. I don't want to tell people to kind of like do my style of review if they don't want to. Do your own style, but just have these kind of sort of guidelines and stuff like that. And that's basically what I ask. And you know, if people want to do it, they want to do it. If they don't want to do it anymore, they don't have to. It's entirely them. And the other thing I would say is I simply wouldn't be able to do as many reviews if other people didn't contribute. So the professional amateur hour, you know, there's certain films I would not be able to get to, or you know, it gives me a buffer to try and like, because I try and do a video a day at the very least, and doing this, you know, doing that 7 days a week is sometimes hard. So when someone else is doing the odd video, it kind of gives me a time to kind of like, you know, get ahead of it basically, and then you don't have to kind of like rush around and think, oh, I can't do one, because I like to try and keep my flow of videos quite consistent. Anyway, can I explain my rating system? Now, if there was ever a question I get asked more than anything else, it is this. So, the rating system. Right, clearly it's 1 to 10, or 0 to 10 in actual fact. And what I think you're asking is, how do I arrive at this score? So let me break it down. Okay. And I come at this in a very kind of like objective and rational way. So if you've got 0 to 10, 10 is a perfect film. If you are rating a film 10, there are no faults with it. I've only ever done this once, Jaws. It's the only film I've ever rated 10. I cannot think, outside it's obviously a little bit old, which is not a criticism I can really, you know, aim at it really, because it's not fair. So a film to be 10 out of 10 has to be perfect. No faults whatsoever. Conversely, 0 out of 10, which I've never actually rated a film 0 out of 10, would have to have no redeeming features whatever. So let's just say, for example, so what's 5 out of 10? The middle. 5 out of 10 for me is what I could class as an average movie. It's not necessarily bad, it's not necessarily good. It's kind of there, it does its job to a kind of like no frill status, but it's not necessarily a bad movie. And then we kind of go, for example, 4. So this airs into the negative. I guess, I mean, even 5 to a degree, I suppose, is a negative. But 4 is where I would say there's some stuff here that detracts from the movie, where the negatives start to outweigh the positives. And then, again, a 6 is the positives. There's more positives in the movie than there are negatives. So in that respect, you know, a film starts to become positive. And how do I judge that? So that's the kind of the rating. But what am I using to judge it? And when I'm looking at a film, I think one of the kind of this is how I approach reviews, right? You're looking at all the aspects of the film. So let's take acting, right? So if you're judging a movie and you're thinking about the acting, and sometimes you'll hear the acting is bad. But does that mean the acting is bad universally through everyone? Because I find that probably unlikely. In a movie, generally speaking, a movie has a variety of actors. So if you say the acting is bad in this movie, what you are saying is every actor is bad in this movie. Which, is that the case? Because I would suggest that in more cases than not, the acting is maybe a variety of qualities. So it's not fair to say the acting is bad. So to me, I have to look at it, okay, is the acting by and large bad? Or is it by and large good? Is the majority of the cast fairly good? Or is there a couple of actors that are kind of bringing it down? And if it is, say, like I said, there was a couple of performances that were weak, it's not fair to say the acting is bad. Now, I think some people will say, oh, that guy was rubbish. And that's fair. But then you would say a couple of actors here have, quite poor performances. Something like that. So it's not fair to say, for example, the acting is bad, and therefore I would probably, depending on what the situation is, but I would kind of like maybe knock a few points off in my mind, or a couple of points. If it was maybe just one bad performance, so more or less it's fine. But things like that. So again, it's and then when you're looking at the kind of the cumulative sort of score, I'm tallying it all up. Is the story good? Is the narrative engaging? Is it some good ideas? Is the music good? Is the editing good? Is the lighting good? All the rest of it. So when I'm thinking about a film and all the bits that kind of go into making a film, these are all coming into effect. So even if it's, for example, a film which had crappy special effects and the acting was pretty much universally terrible, I bet you a lot of reviews will just say it was a terrible film. But then, is it fair to say the composer who did the music, and that was fantastic? You're tiring him with the same brush, or the camera work was really good, or something like that, or the editing was fine. It's not fair to criticise a whole movie for a couple of things, and it works the other way as well. So when I'm watching a movie, I'm taking into effect all of the elements that make a film, and then basing my review on what that is. Now, there are films that I've rated relatively high that I'm not actually a huge fan of, to be honest with you, but critically I can understand that this film is good. There's a film called The Wind, for example, which is kind of like a Western horror. I have to be honest with you, I never want to watch that movie again. I personally didn't find it particularly enjoyable, but I gave it a relatively high review because I can understand what went into that film, and I thought the craft and everything like that was good. And also there were films that, do you know what, I've rated them relatively bad, and but I still enjoyed it. So there you go. And that's basically a kind of an idea about how I do my reviews, how I approach it, which actually is kind of similar to another question, is have I ever regretted a score that I've given a movie? Yes, actually. There was one film that I can think of called Sniper Corps, also called Corpse Sniper. And I gave it a 5 out of 10, which, as I've just explained, is not necessarily a bad review. But you know what? Upon thinking about it, I really enjoyed that movie. It's a very low budget film, and it has its flaws in regards to its production. But I just really enjoyed it. And I thought, I should have given, I won't change it, but I should have given it a higher score, purely because I actually kind of dug it quite a lot, to be honest with you. And I think I watched it on YouTube, and afterwards, I went and got the Blu-ray. So there you go. Do I ever get any feedback from filmmakers? Yes. Or people involved in the film, maybe not all necessarily the filmmaker, but actors and things like that. And it's a mixed in regards to, sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, and sometimes it's just kind of factual. I've actually kind of got to know a few people involved in the kind of the film industry, I suppose, mostly the low budget stuff, but over the years, and it's kind of like I don't let that kind of, if affect my scores. And I won't say who it was, but there was one filmmaker who kept on sending me screeners, and the reviews were relatively negative, I've got to be honest with you. And he was like, do you know, I'm determined to get you like a good review out of you at one point. And he, you know, but I really appreciate the fact that he didn't take it personally. And that comes into another thing when I do talking about reviews, is I don't want to be like nasty or kind of like destructive in reviews. If it's criticism, I would prefer to be constructive. So, you know, yes, sometimes I get into a little bit of a spat with some of the filmmakers. It's happened more than once. And, you know, I don't go out my way to certainly do that, but, yeah, you know, it happens. And sometimes, you know, people just kind of give me little anecdotes about the films and stuff like that, and it's, you know, it's all good. But there you go. But whatever happens, it never really affects my judgment of a film or going forward. I mean, sometimes, you know, well, I'm not on Facebook anymore, but I was on Facebook and a filmmaker added me on Facebook, and then I gave him a negative review and he defriended me. But there you go. Am I paid to do reviews? No. I'm not. I never have been. There have been people who have offered to pay me to do a review, and I have said I will review the film, but I don't want to be paid for it because I don't want to be obliged to give a certain, you know, a certain score. I do get ad revenue, but that's not necessarily coming from the people who are ready to do the film. It's just when you watch ads and stuff that, you know, it doesn't amount to huge amounts, to be honest with you. But I've never been paid directly by anyone involved in the film to do a review. As I say, I have been offered a few times, but I have never taken that up. And I've never done sponsoring either, to be honest with you, because like I don't really do this for the money, to be honest. So yeah, I've never done a sponsor, you'll notice, yeah, I've never taken money for a review either. Any tips for aspiring YouTubers? And I'm not the guru. I mean, there's plenty of channels that are bigger than me, to be honest with you. So, I mean, again, it depends on what you want to do with a YouTube channel. Let's say you're talking about films, because that's basically what I do. It's kind of have a good idea about what you want to do in regards to that. So, what can I say? A couple of things. Depends on what you are talking about on films. I see a lot of like the Bluetuber community, for example, and I find that they talk about the same stuff every video, if you want my honest opinion. So I think it's about kind of diversifying what you do. You know, is physical media dying and all the rest of it? You know, how many videos do we need of that? You know, but that's up to you if that's what you want to do. I would say kind of think about other things potentially that you could potentially do and all the rest of it, you know. In regards to reviewing films, which is more what I do, as I've kind of mentioned, I've talked about my kind of rating system, but think about your thumbnails for a start. A lot of like channels that I see do reviews don't bother with thumbnails. Do a thumbnail. Make sure you're clear when you're talking. Again, as I mentioned in the kind of like, I would suggest try not to make videos too long. He says in a massively long video. So, I mean, it depends what you want to do, if I'm honest. And like I said, I'm no YouTube guru here, and you know, my channel's only 30,000 subscribers, which is by and large a small channel. But I'm happy if you give me specifics about what you want to do. I'm happy to kind of give my feedback, but it's hard to say just in general. So what reviews do I watch? And I think this is the penultimate question. So I like reviews. I like watching reviews for people who review it in a similar way to me. Not because I want to, you know, I'm like the sound of my own voice or anything like that, but I do reviews how I like to consume them. And then what I mean by that is, I don't like, there's certain, like if we look at the bigger review channels like Jeremy Johns and Beyond the Trailer and Stuckman and all the rest of it, I personally don't like reviews which are more about doing a comedy bit. because I'm watching the review to find out about the film, not watch comedy hijinks. I also don't like film reviews that are too sort of like, I don't like ironic film reviews. I know, like, for example, not that it's technically a review, but like Mystery Science Theater 3000 and like Good Bad Flicks, things like that have this kind of like irony about, oh, you know, let's talk about how stupid this thing is, and kind of do this ironic sort of like review of the movie. I don't like that. I actually like to review a film legitimately and talk about the kind of the good and the bad things. So I don't really like ironic reviews. Again, this is just my opinion. I'm not saying you know, that you shouldn't like that. And I like films that if they criticise something, they are constructive and say specifically why. Like, I don't like it. Why don't you like it? Oh, the special effects are bad. Well, what exactly? You know, what do you mean? Things like this. Oh, the acting's bad. What, university? I think that's what we talked about. What are we talking about here? So be specific, you know, and even let's go into a little bit more detail on that even. So, oh, the acting's bad. Well, what do you mean? Okay, there was this one actor who was really bad. Okay, but why was he bad? Okay, so he sounded like he was reading from a script. Okay, cool. I got what you're meaning. Things like that. So a little bit more specific rather than just kind of go, it's rubbish. That's what you call destructive criticism. I prefer constructive criticism. So basically reviews that kind of have a similar sort of way of doing it that I do it. Now, I would say that I don't watch reviews that necessarily have the same opinion as me. That's not what I'm watching a review for. I like to watch a review for someone who can make a good argument whether they do or don't like it. So there you go. And then final question, which I've kind of already answered, to be honest with you. Am I excited about the upcoming Street Fighter film? Yes, I am. I'm well looking forward to this. I think it looks great. And as I mentioned, I actually worked in the video game industry in the 90s. And I remember when Super Street Fighter 2 came out on the Super Nintendo, I want to say, because I was working in the industry at that time, and it was this whole big thing. And there was like this big marketing push for it and all the rest of it. So I have fond memories of Street Fighter, and you know, depending on how old you are, in that time, 2D one-on-one fighting games were the big. That was the big genre. That was the #1 genre at that time, outside of sort of sports games, was one-on-one fighters. The Mortal Kombat's, the Street Fighters, and later on, like the 3D ones like Virtua Fighter and Tekken and all the rest of it. So I've really enjoyed the characters of Street Fighter, and you know, so I am looking forward to it. And I think the movie looks great. Anyway, that's been a long ass video, I'm sure. I doubt many have got to the end, but if you have, I appreciate it. And thanks again for taking the time to subscribe and answer these questions and stuff. And my other video, the personal one, will be out at some point in the future. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye for now.